that follows Mountain State Overland has kind of seen how your group goes after planning trips. So, what is your philosophy in planning trips?
I guess the primary thing that I think about is kind of where we want to go. Had some time to kind of think about that going into this hangout here. And usually the first step is obviously figuring out where you want to go, right? And who you want to be with. I mean, we all kind of got that figured out. From there, what we do is, if it's a video piece, then we try to think about the logistics of where we're going to stop and who we're going to visit and who we're going to interview, and kind of work from there. And we will then go from there to kind of our route planning. So we'll use anything from EarthMate to Topo 10 to Google Maps, and we'll actually plot out all of the different points that we want to travel, all of our key destinations, breweries that we want to visit, or in the case of New England for season 3, lighthouses that we want to stop by and see when we're on the coast, or rivers that we want to fish when we're in the North Maine woods. So we think through that, and we pin out all of the destinations that we want to go, and then we start resourcing the internet. And as far as Maine and New England go, we start to resource some of the main guides or some of the forums that are available on the internet, and we'll connect the dots. So just be like a kid with a placemat at a restaurant or something like that. You give them a crayon, they connect the dots. We kind of do the same thing with Google Maps, and what we try to do is find the most desolate and legal road that we can travel to kind of get us back there and kind of enjoy the adventure between each of our destinations. And then we'll kind of work into the GPS files and stuff like that, but we'll probably get into more of that conversation here later in the hangout. So generally it's where you want to go, who you want to be with, how many people are going, and how serious it is. I mean, if you're doing a video production, it'll take a substantial more time. I mean, it could take months to plan that out, whereas if you're just grabbing some friends and you want to go, you can just go and do that, So it just depends on the complexity of the adventure that you're trying to execute.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot more regimented planning plan than most would, because you are going at most of your trips with the mind that you are producing a video. So I'm sure that has a huge impact on how you're actually planning your trips.
It does, and permits, and making sure that we're not, treading on private property, or making sure that we have permission to be in certain places, or film in national parks, which we're not allowed to, with all the drone regulations and stuff like that too. That's definitely something to think about. So we have that kind of in our head too. But yeah, so as far as some of the stuff that we do for the films and stuff that you see on YouTube, they're much more involved. But generally, adventure planning, like, it's just places that we've been that we just want to go. If there isn't a camera going with us, I mean, it's like, let's just go here, or we're on a forum and hear some good stuff about places that people have been. So resourcing. I mean, we all do that. That's why we're talking this hangout right now, is because we're all providing a resource for everybody. So.
Dan's gone and muted himself.
One of the things that you mentioned in the thread was your philosophy is, not planning too much, because that kind of squeezes the adventure out. So, Mike, can you elaborate on what your philosophy is for trip planning?
All right. Well, the first and biggest step, I think, in the way that I go about planning is thinking about the group that you're with, right? And this goes back to, whenever I used to lead trips. You have to think about what type of adventure, what type of trip that the whole group wants, and what's really appropriate. And that's people, and that's rigs. I drive a full-size truck now. I'm not going to plan a trip through the twisty trails in Arkansas It's just signing up for a couple days of pain, for me. So you have to think about what's appropriate for the group mechanically and skill level, and then gauge the group and figure out about how hard you really want to push it. And then whenever you get into the details, it's as far as planning out actual routes, for me, it's always start on paper maps, and that's the motor vehicle use maps. That's your gazetteers, your map books, DeLorme, whatever it is, whatever is appropriate. And I find that certain books are better for certain areas. And of course, your MVUMs the quality can be all over the place, but some of them are pretty good. And then a lot of the time, if it looks like it's not quite what you were hoping for, just pick up the phone and call the rangers. The local rangers usually do a pretty good job of steering you in the right direction. And then you think about, and then I'll use something like Google Earth or some sort of satellite image, and you can start gauging, all right, how fast do I think I'm going to be able to travel reasonably on this? And typically I'll start with about 6 hours worth of travel per day, as far as this is our rolling time. And then you just kind of do the math of what distance are we going to do here, depending on how rough you're expecting the roads to be. That's my general formula.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a pretty loose plan. I think 6 hours is, I think, given my experience anyways, that's pretty aggressive for what I try to do with my family. But it's good to have that as a planning factor. And I definitely know what you mean about planning for a full size. I do the same thought process now with the trailer. So, Raul, you mentioned before while we were chatting, kind of off the hangout, that you haven't done that many long trips. And I'm curious as to what kind of thought process you have when you're attacking a trip like that. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I suspect that means you have to plan with a little more precision because you have less slack and buffer time in your schedule.
Yeah, not necessarily. I think mainly it's the kids that put a whole other factor to everything. Um, if it's just me by myself and a bunch of my friends, it's a lot easier to plan. But once the kids factors into it, basically all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, that's true. I know it doesn't take much with the kids' schedule to really throw off the entire trip plan. And it seems like the wild cards that those kids carry in their pockets are innumerable. There's just so many things to plan for.
Yes, totally agree. Potty breaks. On the way back, I had 3 potty breaks. 2 of them fake potty breaks. So trying to find a place to park my truck and a trailer behind it was kind of a pain in the butt.
Oh yeah, I totally get that. Well, Alex, it's your turn now. In all the videos that I've seen you put together, I don't know that we've seen trip planning really come into it as any more than, hey, we're going to go there and see some cool stuff. But the videos always come out awesome. So what is your philosophy when you come at trip planning?
Yeah, considering it's a video adventure, it's not really that heavily planned at all. It generally starts with me seeing a picture on Instagram or somebody mentioning something and thinking, yeah, I feel like going there. And then thinking about an appropriate length for the trip and thinking about who would enjoy that sort of trip. And I've got certain groups of people that prefer the long distance country stuff and seeing history. And then I've got groups of people that get bored if there's 10 minutes without crawling over a rock or something. So and that's how I go about choosing who I invite on them. And from there, for maybe a weekend trip, I'll plan it quite tight. I'll think about maybe the destination that I'm heading to, and then think, how can I get there by sticking just to the dirt? And so, for instance, the last trip I went on to a place called Cervantes, 2.5 hours north of Perth. You can go there straight via the highway, or you can pull off the highway and duck through all these old shacks and fishing villages and stuff and cruise along the beach to get there. So I'll always try and pick the place that's going to be most interesting for video, and, well, it's off-road driving, so as little road as I possibly can.
Excellent. Well, so the way I kind of think of it is in terms of the trip length, and I use that to frame the rest of the planning. And like I said before, is that if it's a shorter trip, if I know I only can get out on a Friday night and have to be back by the middle of Sunday, I know either to kind of curb my appetite on how much I want to accomplish and what kind of distance I want to cover, or I just plan for a lot of slack in the trip. If you try to plan it, try to bite off too much, then you'll be disappointed that you don't get that much done. And since I try to take the family, the kids, and the dog whenever I go out as much as I can, I know I need to really tone back my expectations. And so far, that's been pretty good. I've been successful in that. And I haven't yet been able to get out and explore too much around here in Alaska, but there is there's a lot to do, but it's very spread out. Uh, there is a lot of ground to cover. If I want to leave Fairbanks and just get to Anchorage, that is still an 8-hour trip on the highway with no stops. Fortunately, between here and Anchorage is Denali National Park, so that is certainly on my list of places to go. And even most people consider the Arctic Circle a day trip from here, but that's still a 5-hour trip. And there's not much in between here and there, or once you get past there. So that's kind of how I come at thinking it. But then once we get into actual planning, the devil's in the details. You want to be able to see what all's out there. So I'm kind of interested. Taylor, you mentioned the maps that you're using. What are the most reliable physical mapping products that you use?
Um, we do a lot of our trips in the same area, the Ozark National Forest. So I have started using CalTopo on the computer to plot my routes.
What is that one again?
What's that?
What is the name of that one again?
CalTopo, CalTopo.com.
Okay.
And I will pull up. It's the Forest Service maps. So they've got all the trails, all the four-wheel drive trails, all that they're on there. So I'll map out all my routes on that, and then transfer that over to Backcountry Navigator on my tablet, and that's what we use to navigate while we're actually out there.
Does that CalTopo cover all of the United States, or is that just your area? Do you know?
I believe it covers everything.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to have to check that one out. Do you have a favorite physical map that you like to take? Because I am of the only thing that's going to ruin a paper map is water and kids' feet.
Yeah, I've got the giant paper map of the Ozark National Forest that I picked up from a ranger station there. And I always keep that in my backpack that is with me all the time.
Have you done anything to try and preserve that map, make it a little more packable?
Not yet. I have not. I've definitely been meaning to, but just haven't got around to it yet.
Okay. Well, I guess that's the benefit of them being available at the ranger station, is that there's probably replacements easily and readily available.
Absolutely. I've considered laminating it and hanging it up on the wall in my garage and then grabbing another copy to keep with me at all the time. And so that way when I'm planning a trip, it's right there on the wall, and I can just, with my finger, map out a route right there, and then get on the computer and start tracing it out.
There you go. Well, Jason, what are some of the physical products that you use?
So this year we're using an InReach and EarthMate to navigate. Our whole route for 2016 was built using Topo 10, and the output of that was a series of GPX files that we can load into the EarthMate app for a tablet that we'll have in each of the vehicles. We'll have a couple tough books in 2 of the trucks that will be with us, and then and then I'll have an inReach and with me to be able to communicate with the family and stuff like that too. So we won't be using the inReach necessarily to navigate because the screen's like that big. So we'll be using inReach to kind of track our progress and communicate. So prior to that, last year and the year before that, we built all of our routes, using paper maps, using motor vehicle use maps. And I will say that motor vehicle use maps here in along the Appalachian Mountains are extremely unreliable. For our use, specific to this region. You get different Forest Service districts and stuff like that with different motives or different schedules, and there's gates open when they're not supposed to be open, or gates closed when they're not supposed to be closed. So, so I've turned away from actually using the motor vehicle use maps because it's gotten me really excited several times about traveling some roads that I haven't been on, and come to find out they're closed. So we've used Google Maps in the past, and like I said, pinned out, I want to go there, I want to see this road, I've never heard of this community or whatever, I want to drive through it, I want to see the people, and to now using some of DeLorme's software, so to kind of map things out, because it's important for the team, not just because of the video piece of it, but when you're leading a trip, you can tell like when people get a little stir crazy because you're stopped and trying to figure out where to go. I've been able to pick up on that several times for all the trips that we've done. So I like to try to have plan A, B, and C kind of optioned out in our route or in our device, in electronic format, so we can quickly keep the team moving. So it becomes more of a sense of like a continuous adventure, whereas it's a lot of fun sometimes to pull a map up and be able to say, well, let's go here and let's turn around. But if it's or let's turn around, or let's pull out the maps and look at it. But if it's 5 o'clock at night and it's about ready to get dark and everybody's hungry and everybody wants a beer, so if you can keep everybody moving, that's always good. So those are kind of some of the devices that we'll be using this year, and everything will be mounted on the dashes and stuff. So.
Yeah, I have had great experience with the DeLorme inReach, and I have the first generation one that has no screen. But fortunately, it Bluetooth pairs with your phone or iPad or whatever, and then you have as much screen real estate as you could want. Then you're limited only to the memory, because those maps do take up a fair amount of space. So at least that's been my finding. I used it when I was hunting, and even though the hunting spot was only 100 miles away, that's 100 miles of Alaskan wilderness.
Oh yeah.
So excellent. All right, Raul, do you have any favorite physical map products that you're using to plan trips?
No, I don't have any physical ones, but I also use CalTapo on it, and I use Gia GPS for my software on the iPad.
Oh yeah, Gia or Jaya or whatever it is.
Yeah, and now no one has mentioned it, but what is everybody using for their GPS coordinates? Other than using the iPad with a built-in GPS, I'm using the dual GPS receiver to Bluetooth link to my iPad and any other phone in the vehicle.
That's a good question. I have not used that dual GPS. It's like a puck that it Bluetooth attaches, isn't it?
Correct, yeah. And the one I have is a Dual Sky Pro, I believe, and it's you can connect up to 6 Bluetooth devices to that one GPS unit.
Oh wow. I'm sure that's helpful, because then it's using the battery off the Dual Sky Pro GPS instead of the actual device. Isn't that how it works?
Correct, and I have mine hardwired. At least the puck. If anybody's seen my thread, you can see how I hardwired everything.
Okay.
But yeah, it also, that way you don't have to turn the GPS on your phones or the tablet, which just kills the battery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, we had used Gia the last couple of years. I will honestly say the first year we kind of got aggressively out on the road and explored. It was very reliable, and then last year, as they were pushing out app updates and stuff like that, the arrow would be pointing down when we'd be going, like constantly fixed in a certain point, and we'd be traveling up or something like that, and just little bugs. I mean, the software still works, it works well, but and relied on that pretty heavily, and I don't know if they've worked through that since, but
Sounds like they might have an issue with how it's reading the position sensor, that 3-axis position sensor.
mhm.
But very good. All right, Mike, do you have any favorite physical products that you're using?
Well, I like my paper maps. As I've said before, that's my primary. I haven't caught up on the newfangled technology train yet. I am still using a Garmin 60 CSX hiking GPS with a little stand in one of my cup holders, and that just tells me where I am once I get lost. And I don't usually use that. I'm pretty much just a paper map guy, man. Just keep my eyes on the road and north, south, east, west, and just go where I feel like going.
Hey, I like your style. I am a big fan of the paper maps myself, and I have a Garmin 60 CSX as well. I don't use it very much because the dog, when he was a puppy, chewed up the antenna. Still functions perfectly. I have not tested its ability to resist water intrusion and a drop in the stream, but it works great.
You
And
can't hurt those
been 10
things.
years. Yeah,
They're bomb-proof.
they are. All right, Alex, what kind of paper maps do you have available there in Australia?
The main one is probably HEMA maps, and I think me and just about everybody else uses them. There's other ones out there, but the HEMA maps are developed for four-wheel drivers and overlanding and that sort of thing. So I tend to start off with my big full Australia map. I've got one mounted up on the wall by HEMA, of course. And that's the one I use for trips that are maybe over a week, where I'm covering bigger distances per day and that sort of thing, where I can get a bit of an idea of the distance between points and how long to take. And from there I've got further HEMA maps that just go in deeper detail, and they're the paper folding ones that I can take along in the car as well. And then on my shorter trips, I'll take my HEMA Maps Road Atlas, which is a big, thick, sort of 1.5 inch thick book full of all the maps in pretty good detail. They don't have all the really small tracks that I go down, and so when I'm planning like a 1 or 2 day adventure, like some of my videos where things have got a bit muddy and tight, you don't see a lot of that detail on the HEMA maps, and that's when I'll turn to Google Earth. And on Google Earth, I'll sort of try and map out a bit of a track and some waypoints that way. And so that's what I tend to do for my paper maps. And as far as devices go, I use the HEMA Navigator, the HN5i, which is probably 4 or 5 years old now. It's getting on a bit, but it still does the job all right. And unfortunately, I lost all the software for it. So I figured out some way to manually get all my Google Earth waypoints into that. And that seems to work okay for me for now.
Man. Well, unfortunately, I could be wrong, but I don't think we have HEMA maps available here in the United States. However, a secret squirrel at one time told me that they are looking at coming to North America. So
I have seen that they've got a HEMA Map Patrol vehicle out there somewhere. I see it about on Instagram, and I don't know if they're mapping the US or what, but you might have some to come.
I certainly hope so. I need to make some friends. Fortunately, I work very closely with some people in the not map industry. It's more of a subsector of mapping that I get to work with, thanks to my job.
Yeah.
But I am a huge fan of paper maps, and I am probably one of the few people that runs GPSs on multiple grid formats. That way I can actually, be interoperable with the different types of maps that I have available to me. Um, just because the grid the military grid system, it uses the same maps, but it is portrayed in a very different format that is not as easily understood by most people with you can switch over your Garmin GPS to use that MGRS format, but if you're not familiar with how that's laid out on a physical map, it's probably not going to do you much good.
Yeah.
One of the tools that I use, and I'm surprised nobody's mentioned it yet on how they plan trips, is with geocaches. There is a large amount of geocachers out there in the world, and somebody may have found just the perfect vista, and you won't be able to just stumble upon it on a lot of times. But if you look at that at the geocaching.com website, and you find some of those geocaches that are placed out in the middle of nowhere, if you go into the instructions, sometimes it'll give you pretty clear instructions on how to get there. Other times it won't, and those are the more exciting ones, because that requires you to dig out some maps and start planning how you're going to get there anyways. But like you mentioned, Jason mentioned, you want to stay on the legal routes. A lot of those routes could cross over onto somebody's personal private property, and that's where you have to kind of consider multiple mapping sources, because Google Maps, as good as it is, does not make always legal routes. I've seen many times there's been public roads on the map turn out to be a gated road because it crosses somebody's property. And depending on where you're at in the world and in the United States, sometimes those routes may actually be public and somebody has put a gate over it just because they don't want you going back there, but they don't necessarily have the right to stop you from going back there. So that's another thing to consider. Have you guys dealt with that before? Mike, you see you shaking your head. What have you done when you come across a public route that is closed off as if it's a private route?
Well, it's tough, man. I mean, in most of the situations, what can you do? It's you're not going to argue with a potential landowner. Hey, this map says it's public, but you've got a gate here saying something along the lines of get off my land, or I will call the authorities, or whatever else they have saying on there. But I have taken the time on a couple occasions to follow up afterwards with local law enforcement. Hey, this is marked as a publicly maintained right of way, and there are gates there, and they'll go out there and check it out, and in some cases I'm sure they'll tell the landowner to cut it out, or it's every time I've seen it, it's an adjacent landowner that's just tired of people going down the county road that's right next to their property, and that's been every time that I've seen it.
I'm guessing you're talking about the Ouachita National Forest?
Ouachita, and then we ran into some trouble putting together. I don't know, you guys know, I put together the Hill Country trip down in Texas, but while we were putting that one together, we ran into that as well, and we did get it opened.
Awesome.
Illegal road closure.
Mike, I was going to ask, what brand or what map maker, what paper maps do you use?
Well, in Texas, the Roads of Texas book by Mapsco is the best one that I've found. In Oklahoma, the DeLorme Gazetteer is reasonably good, but you need to use it in conjunction with the MVUMs. So Arkansas, I use the Gazetteer as well. There's like I said, there's different ones for different areas. New Mexico, the Gazetteer doesn't work as well out there. You just kind of have to figure it out state by state. So get a couple maps and just see which one makes the most sense. Nobody's got it perfect. It's just some are more right than others.
Okay, cool. I just didn't know if there was maybe one brand that you found was right more often than the others, or not.
No, the Lorem Gazetteers are reasonably good, reasonably reliable. Just about everywhere. They're not going to have a lot of the detail. For the little twisty trails out in Arkansas, for example, that's you got to have a little bit more tribal knowledge. There's not going to be a map book that's going to show you all the coolest stuff. Same thing out in Colorado, same thing out in New Mexico, but they're going to get you pretty close with the Gazetteer most of the time. And then in Texas, I've just been using them enough to where I know that the Roads of Texas book by Mapsco is a little better.
Awesome.
So
yeah,
since
we've
we're
seen
talking about DeLorme maps. I might also mention that since DeLorme was recently acquired by Garmin, there's been I've seen it in a couple articles where DeLorme has announced that they are going to be shutting down some paper mapping stores. So what that actually is going to look like, I'm not sure. I hope it doesn't mean they're going to stop production on those on the Gazetteers. That would be a major loss for the world. As soon as I read that, I went out and scooped up a new Alaska Gazetteer, and I've got a pretty good library of them stocked up now from other states that I've frequented. But now I'm going to hold those even a little more closely. I may have to go back to Blue Ridge Overland Gear and order a couple more of their map pouches to protect them from, watering kids' feet. So.
Yeah, we've through Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Vermont. We've experienced a very diverse sort of like landowner, private road, public access road kind of vibe, so to speak. So in Vermont, there's lots of public road systems that are outdated that show up on maps, and I don't want to go on record saying it's kind of a free for all up there, as far as that, because people that are out there, exploring those roads are very responsible about how they travel. But some of the roads that we traveled, up in Vermont, you take that and translate that into West Virginia, like there's no way that you would travel down that road, so or you would even attempt to do that, because Joe, landowner here, you can just tell like it's probably not a good idea that we just go driving through there, and then in Virginia's been very welcoming, considering some of those roads and stuff like that. So it's kind of state dependent, there's in West Virginia, for example, like you're not going to see very rarely are you going to see guys in Land Rovers or Land Cruisers or Tacoma pickups or 4Runners or whatever you're driving, wanting to drive through somebody's backyard because it says it's an open road on a Gazetteer. Like they're just not going to do that, is what they, compared to what may happen out west or in Texas or Australia. So yeah, it just depends on the region, and you've always got to keep in mind, and like what David was saying, or so keep in mind, like or Mike was saying, keep in mind the landowner piece of it and knowing what that is, and then following up afterwards. If law enforcement does look into it and investigate, and they can communicate back, and you can work on opening that road or addressing that so nobody else has that similar experience, then that benefits everybody. So
yeah, I'll go on record. If you're in Texas, you do not want to be caught on the wrong road.
Yeah, it's probably the same way in West Virginia. So
yep. I was on a public road, but this one time, and before we finish up, I'll give everybody a chance to share a story, either non-attributional, like it was a friend that or your own story. I'll let you decide. But a story I have, I was on, a public road, public drive, but that sound of a shotgun was not directly in my direction, but it was really close. And so I stopped, turned around, and beat feet the other direction. So that is one thing. Err on the side of caution. Leave the confrontation with landowners to the law. Don't do that yourself. Well, is there a digital trip planning product that we have not mentioned that somebody wants to jump in with? No, no, that's it. We have covered every single digital trip planning product under the sun.
But nobody mentioned
Every single one I use anyway.
Yeah, I think we've got a relatively small scope here in the crowd. You know, a lot of paper maps, and then a few of the newfangled technology users, but not a whole lot of depth in this market on this call.
What were you
Yes.
saying, Jason?
Yeah, so Basecamp, Garmin Basecamp, I never heard really anybody talk about that. And, we've got a guy in Maine actually using Topo 10 building our, that built our backcountry route. And I'm actually going to be using Topo 10 because I got a Windows machine. I don't want to load up a peripheral on my MacBook just so I can run some Windows software. But, Basecamp, Garmin Basecamp has some, good tools too. I don't want to compare it to Topo 10 at all by any means because I don't think it's even quite there. Definitely specific to the Garmin device, regardless of the merger, But, Basecamp is definitely something I think a lot of people use. Probably the motorcycle, the ADV crowd, on dual sport crowd is pretty actively using that here in the States. And I did have one question for Alex, specific to HEMA. I'm just kind of curious because I've done some research on that, and HEMA's got a good presence, on the internet and social media, and I have seen that HEMA Land Cruiser actually at the Vermont Overland Rally, and then at Expo East. I think that rig may be owned by Overland International. I could be wrong, but yes, I have seen that, and I don't know, what the intent of that is. But could you talk more about maybe some proprietary electronics that HEMA has? Don't they have their own GPS devices too, or how's that work?
Yeah, they do, and that's what I've got. They've been producing them for maybe 7 or 8 years, and they run, or they used to run, and they do on my version, a program called Aussie Explorer. And I don't know if anybody in the States uses it. Obviously, given its name, it's an Australian program, but it's based to run on Windows CE. And people started using it back in sort of the late 90s when mapping was first available, GPS mapping and that sort of thing. And so that's what all the HEMA devices use. They run Aussie Explorer and then display their maps on that. I think it changed in the bigger devices. They name their devices by screen size. So mine's the HEMA 5, which is a 5-inch screen, and then they went to 6, and then they've got a 7-inch screen. But those are all the devices they produce with their own maps on them, but they don't keep the maps exclusive to their devices. So there's a whole heap of other similar ones out there that use the HEMA maps. VMS is another device I can think of, which is very similar in design and uses the HEMA maps. And I think another company called Polaris might use HEMA maps as well. Don't quote me on that, but a lot of the companies are using the HEMA maps on their devices.
Yeah, I was just looking at the HEMA map website. It looks like the HEMA Navigator 7 is just about $700 Australian.
Yep.
Then it comes with 2 years of map updates and all the detail for the entire country of Australia. And like I said from before, I haven't been able to personally experience navigating off-road using HEMA maps, but it seems that they are in extremely uh, precise detail and has a lot of things that you may not necessarily think about needing, but like landing strips. That's something that I think about
Mm.
here when exploring Alaska. There's a lot of resources available at landing strips that are in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, they have a whole lot of map patrol vehicles that just drive around the country constantly, sort of checking their information and making sure that tracks on their maps actually exist and are still open and that sort of thing to update their maps with. So they're fairly active.
Sounds like I
Yeah,
need to go apply for a job.
Yeah, I think so.
yeah. That's kind of what I think. I see the images, through social media and stuff from HEMA maps, and they really, um, really give you that good image of, adventure and expedition travel. And that's kind of interesting. You think about the Google car that you see, the Prius or the whatever they're driving around, with a camera on top of it through the streets here in the U.S. But then you see, HEMA Land Cruiser or Patrol or something like that, driving and validating roads similar to what we do here on the streets. They're doing, in the backcountry or the bush of Australia. So, yeah. So if there's an opening for that position, please let me know. So Dan and I can apply for that.
Yeah. No, I know there is a company in the United States. It is Funtrex Guidebooks, and they're based out of Monument, Colorado. And they make those guidebooks for certain parts of the United States that are, more heavily traveled off-road. I'd like to see them start creating guidebooks for some of the other states like Washington and Oregon, um, because they do a really good job of providing GPX tracks to go along, so you can import the GPS information into whatever GPS that you're using. But they have the companion book that not just lays out the route, but they give some of the history and they tell you what it is that you're looking at and have some information on what to look out for on the trail, and it gives some trail ratings as well, so you can tailor your trip to the kind of vehicles and the kind of travel that you're expecting to do.
Hmm.
So that's a really good one. Fun Treks guidebooks. Well, and actually, just recently, I had a chance to sit down on Skype with what was it? Rugged Routes, and Rugged Routes is the GPS files and everything going on the Lowrance GPSs that are, used for fishing and for Baja racing. But it is a very rugged screen, a rugged unit that is designed to provide some really good screen real estate. Um, it's not just a fish finder. It has some really, really good mapping available to it if you pick up those maps. And the Rugged Routes proprietor is still, he's making the maps for his area because it is kind of a project born out of necessity for himself. But I think, it's using National Forest Service maps and things like that. So if you have some of those tools available to you, you can match up geospatial imaging with the maps and line that up and see where the routes are, and then import that into the GPS yourself, depending on how badly you want to have that really accurate map combined with satellite imagery. So, and that's another thing we really haven't mentioned. Have you guys? Is there a tool that you use, not just maps, but do you look at the satellite imagery as you're planning your trips? I see a lot of head nodding. Mike, how is it you're using satellite imagery when you're planning?
So, I'm a backpacker, through hiker, getting into this. So, that partially explains the paper maps thing, right? When you're, at least whenever I was in my heyday of doing a lot of hiking, just having all this stuff wasn't that available, but Google Earth and stuff was. So I could look at these satellite pictures and then US Geo topo maps, and then print them off at the local Kinko's store, and I still do that. I still do essentially that same thing, once I have a rough plan of that route established, I basically run the route using the Google Earth terrain or actual satellite functions, just to make sure it's a legit route. Second, you don't run into stuff that you're not expecting, gates that you're not expecting. And then, one thing that I've been able to avoid that was not expected at all was that there was a recent burn in the area, big fire that had taken it out. That I guess was local to the area, so it didn't make the newsreel. But the whole road was, the road surfaces get all muddy and just basically destroyed after a fire. So sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but yeah, run the route and using the satellite images, it could save you a lot of headaches on the ground.
Absolutely. I have noticed that sometimes those maps show that the road goes through, but when you look at the satellite imagery, you can find some interesting facts, like that bridge is no longer in existence, or it wasn't in existence, the last time the satellites passed over there and imported the imagery, or just trails run out. The areas that we like to explore are the areas that are probably frequently changing by nature anyways. So that's a good thing to mention. Well, all right, so as we wrap up, I want to open it up, like I mentioned, and hear your best story of your trip planning gone awry. And like I said, this could be for attribution, or this could be a friend that you know. Taylor, you got any stories of a trip planning session gone wrong?
Not any personally, but I've got the one that we briefly discussed before, where a group of my friends went and did the K Trail in the Ouachita National Forest, and they ran across a spike strip that had been purposely laid into a mud pit, and on 11 Jeeps they came out with 19 flats.
Oh,
Whoa.
that's bad business.
Yeah, and it was because a local landowner did not want people passing through there, even though it was a public road.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that coming up in discussion, and you guys trying to address that. And did you guys ever figure out who it was that was doing that?
I don't know that they ever figured out who it was, but I know the sheriff was notified, and the spike strip was located and pulled out, and to my knowledge it hasn't happened again since, but I don't believe they ever caught the person that did it.
That's too bad. Well, Raul, do you have any stories of trip planning gone wrong?
Not really, since most of my trips are only a few days long. I mean, other than the normal flat tires and having to go into town and get them replaced, haven't really come up with anything else.
Well, that's all just, general trip excitement anyways. That's not really a plan that went sideways anyways.
Agreed.
All right, Jason, you've been on quite a few and through some exciting areas. West Virginia, I'm sure, is always full of excitement. So have you had any planning things go sideways?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think like which would be the better story. Yeah, we obviously can't translate some of these. I wish we could run a camera like all the time and translate some of these crazy stories that we encounter, or try to narrate them on video, but it just doesn't make sense. But West Virginia is an awesome place. Spent a lot of time in West Virginia in my life, and I'll probably share the story from there. But I think going into this story, is one thing to consider is always know your environment and know where you are. Know what the fuel is at the local gas station. Know what it's like driving down a country road if people are waving at you. I like to drive down the road in unfamiliar territory and wave at every single person that I pass as I'm driving down the road, or as I'm passing by their house. And if they don't wave back, then I can get a pretty good gauge of what that region's like. So we had some interesting activity in Tennessee, and we were able to forecast and know kind of what we needed to do based on how welcoming that local region was. But specific to the story, I guess. So we were in southern West Virginia, and we were traveling down some pipeline roads, so gas pipeline roads and stuff like that were adopted, throughways with the local communities and stuff. And we took a wrong turn through all my navigating. Using aerial maps and stuff is good, but when you get in deep forests and stuff like that, you can't even really tell where the road goes. So we took a wrong turn and ended at a gate, a makeshift gate that was spray painted orange and sitting on sawhorses. It was a 2x6 sitting on a couple sawhorses with several signs that says, do not pass, veteran-owned property. Basically everything suggesting that if we attempted to go through there, it could end up in an all-out war. So we made the decision to go ahead and turn around and peel out of there. And as we were turning around, the landowner came down this four-wheel drive only one-way road in a mountain holler and blocked us in. And of course, you're one guy and 6 or 7 other dudes. So, but it was very intimidating anyway. So as I was running camera and kind of telling the team, what we needed to do, we're obviously on the wrong track here. We're making the decision to turn around. We started to approach the landowner and saw him reach back in his truck and pull something out that was kind of shiny. So we started talking and started dialing it back and told him what we were doing and told him that we're trying to showcase, southern West Virginia as a tourist opportunity for people to get out and explore, and quickly turned the situation into a very fun conversation. But if you're the wrong person with a wrong attitude and you don't know what your surroundings are, it can get ugly pretty quick.
That's really good advice. So glad that didn't go the opposite direction that it could have.
Yeah.
It would not be a good story.
So wave at everybody that you pass and know that if they don't wave back, either they're having a bad day or they don't want you there.
That's really smart. All right, Alex, do you have any stories you're willing to share?
Yeah, mine involves getting stuck overnight. We were on a beach on the south coast of the country and drove through the river mouth of the Warren River, and it's only crossable at certain times during the day, so we crossed through that and went for a bit of a drive up along the beach and got horrifically stuck and nearly lost our vehicle in the surf. And by the time we had managed to recover this vehicle and come back the way we came, the only way to get out, the tide was in and the river was too high.
Oh no.
So we ended up stuck there, sleeping on the beach for the night, not where we planned to at all. So a lesson there in watching your times for the tides. I know a lot of you guys don't do beach driving, but tides can really catch you out.
No kidding. I hadn't even given that a thought, but yeah, that's tides could ruin your day or your weekend real fast.
Yeah, and we've got Easter coming up this weekend, and it's a very popular place to head for Easter, and I've got no doubt I'll be seeing sunken cars in that rivermouth pictures up all over Facebook for the whole weekend. It consumes so many vehicles.
Oh man, you may want to just stage yourself appropriately on the banks and ready to throw a hook out there to somebody to rescue them. Might be a good.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's like, oh, do you watch your pride and joy sink, or do you give me a carton of beer?
There you go. All right,
Yeah.
Mike, you're up. You got any stories you're willing to share?
Well, I'm kind of there with Jason. It's which one, right? I'll just go ahead and share the one on the K Trail as well. I think everybody's had some sort of trouble on the K Trail. Mine was several years ago. I think I want to say 2010, 2011. But we were out had a vehicle breakdown. Took us a couple hours to fix it, and we had a local buzz by, and we waved, no wave back, and then about an hour later they go back the other way, and we waved and no wave back, and pretty obvious we've got women and kids with us. It's pretty unusual for somebody not to stop, but we get the vehicle put back together, and we're trying to head out, and they have made a blockade and lit it on fire.
Oh, wow.
And so we stop the vehicles and get out, and what the heck is going on? And then we see them. I guess they'd been waiting for us, get out of the truck and start walking towards us, at which point I pulled out a large caliber revolver and fired a warning shot to let them know that I do not want them getting within 50 feet of me. They got the message and they left. And we, basically bulldozed their bonfire out of the way, and, drove. We actually left the K-Trail that night and went and got a hotel room because the girls were pretty shaken up by that.
I'm sure.
Mike, I didn't realize that was you on that trip. That story is legendary amongst most Oklahomans. That's a very popular story.
I was leading that trip. That was me.
That's awesome.
I thought Taylor was going to say that he started the fire.
No.
Oh, we have uncovered the legend. Here it is. Well, my mishap is far less exciting, but it was when I was a lot younger. I was of the legal driving age, and I was working, and this was on the Air Force Academy with the Natural Resources Department, and we were clearing some areas, some trails, and I was actually operating the fire department's Suburban. It's a lifted Suburban. It was on 35s, and it was a very well-equipped, ready vehicle, except it was just also very large. And what looked like a road that went through actually choked down to so narrow we couldn't get through. But I didn't find that out until I was a mile and a half up on top of a ridgeline, and had climbed the side of the hill to get there, with no way to turn back around. So my failure to plan, or planning gone sideways, is that I had to back the Suburban a mile and a half down a trail that was getting some tree branch pinstriping on both sides the entire time. So that was quite the adventure for a 16-and-a-half-year-old with a vehicle that I did not own and did not want to roll down the side of a hill. It would be very unfortunate to see the fire department's truck roll down the hill and catch on fire. Incredibly ironic, and I didn't want to be the legend in that story. Oh, well, I think we're right at an hour, I think, here, so we can go ahead and wrap this up and give everybody a chance to say where they can be followed and learn more about the legend. So Mike, I'll let you lead up. Where is the best place that somebody can keep up with your adventures and get some more information on how you plan trips if they're interested? Oh, looks like Mike may have been frozen, so we'll come back to him. Raul, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, so where can somebody go to learn more about you and how you do all your trip planning?
You can find us on expeditionoutfitters.com, Instagram, Facebook, and on the American Adventures Forum.
Excellent. I should clarify, that is Expedition, so no E, just starts with the letter X.
Correct.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you for joining us. Hopefully we can get you back on another show in the future. I know you've got quite a few interesting projects going up, so if we don't hear you on the Overland Roundtable, I am positive we'll hear you over on the 4x4 podcast.
Thank you.
All right. Alex, where can we go to find more about Intense Off-Road?
You'll find me on the website, intenseoffroad.com, and under the same name on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And for the record, that's Intense, and the kind of tents that you would camp in.
One of these days, we're going to get a little banner made for your video here.
I know.
All right, Jason, where can we go to find more and follow your adventures?
You can find us at mountainstateoverland.com and pretty much hit everything on social media from that site. In social media, we're at MS Overland, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com Mountain State Overland. So, yeah, awesome.
Perfect. And when have you already started recording the videos for the next season or series?
Yeah, we have actually. We're building a 2015 Trail Edition Forerunner right now. We've started filming that build, and well underway with logistics for season 3. We're filming a continuous season for 2.5 to 3 weeks. We'll be on the road, so and producing that and turning that around in a series here this summer in July. So
Perfect. I'm looking forward to seeing those hit the YouTubes. All right, Taylor, where can we go to follow your adventures?
The Overland Adventures can be found on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to seeing some more videos and some of the new stuff that you've got going on in the back.
Yeah, we've got a little trip coming up in April. It's going to be a family trip, so I don't know how much filming we'll do, but we'll definitely be posting some pictures and stuff from that trip. So that'll be good.
Perfect. All right, Mike, I'm glad you were able to get back on here. We were just sharing, where is it somebody can go to learn more about your adventures?
Oh, well, I don't post too many trip reports anymore, but you can find me usually hanging out over on American Adventurist Forum. I'm usual suspect over there.
Yeah, it was good to see you chiming in on the thread when I posed the question on how people plan trips. So I'll be interacting with you more over there and seeing what all you got going on. Well, and I am your moderator for the Overland Roundtable, Dan Cole, and also the host of the 4x4 podcast. So you can find that at the4x4podcast.com and the same name on all the different social media outlets. And we are producing, new episodes for the 4x4 podcast year-round. We try to get about 2 episodes a month, but it's a wide-ranging off-road show. So be glad to have you check us out. You can subscribe in iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts. So, well, guys, that is it. Session number 6 of the Overland Roundtable is in the bag. So, thanks again, and we will talk to you again when we come back for session number 7. We'll talk to you later. All right, we are good to go.
sweet.
It's live.
Oh, yeah, still live.